It is time to go forth, become a star-faring civilization.
This is a very different kind of space colony. People are going to want to live here.
It's the battle of the billionaires.
It's time to go back to the moon, this time to stay.
We won a new space race. The races are exciting.
It really is the stuff of science fiction.
Two of the biggest figures in the US tech industry are competing to revolutionize our relationship with space and build the foundations for life beyond Earth. But to understand how space exploration became synonymous with competition, let's take a trip back to the late 50s.
1957 marked the beginning of the space age. Sputnik was in orbit. America was stunned.
This was the space race, the USSR against the US.
They may well ask, why climb the highest mountain?
A clash between East and West.
Khrushchev had good reason to celebrate.
Communism and capitalism.
Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic?
An era of optimism and aspiration.
Yuri Gagarin, the first man to successfully orbit the Earth.
Patriotism and nationalism.
John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
So I actually went to Russia 3 times to look at buying a refurbished ICBM.
This is Tesla boss Elon Musk.
I can tell you it was very weird.
He could well be the person who takes the human race beyond the moon to Mars. And this is his adversary, Amazon boss Jeff Bezos.
Can you imagine how Alan Shepard must have felt all those years ago? Must have been pretty cool.
Don't let their relaxed demeanor fool you. When they first came on the scene, these billionaire entrepreneurs had no experience whatsoever in space exploration.
Let me show you something.
But their ambition is wholly serious.
You may know Jeff Bezos because he's the guy who invented Amazon, and he's got this company called Blue Origin.
This is an incredible vehicle, and it's going to the moon.
Earth is the cradle of humanity, but you cannot stay in the cradle forever.
Elon Musk is, I think it's one of those names that you know it even if you don't know why you know it. He's behind Tesla, the electric car company. He helped found PayPal, but it's his company SpaceX that he's really sinking his heart into.
These two tech titans are vying to be the dominant force in space. And if the space race was a test of American capitalism, this is a vindication of it. A victory lap run by a tortoise and a hare.
The minute you think one might be ahead, the other seems to go ahead.
Bezos, the tortoise, is slow-moving, patient and quiet.
The thing with Blue Origin is that they don't really tell you a lot. They're a lot less public than, say, someone like Elon Musk and his company SpaceX.
Musk, the hare, has become increasingly famous over the last few years for his bombastic displays. As well as some more unorthodox behaviour, such as sampling weed legally on a podcast.
Only the strongest memes survive.
And sharing many, many dank memes. Their common aim is to make space travel cheaper. And this is perhaps most evident in how they are solving the problem of single-use rockets. This is normally the point where the pricey rocket boosters come crashing back to Earth. But not anymore. They can now land and, crucially, be reused.
We want the things that are in science fiction novels and movies not to be science fiction forever. We want them to be real one day.
The magnates both immersed themselves in sci-fi when they were young, gaining inspiration from such authors as Isaac Asimov and Frank Herbert. Musk, who loves to reference pop culture, included this nod to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in one of his more outlandish moments when he sent his own sports car into space. Musk's geeky playfulness contrasts with Bezos' more earnest approach. Just take their rockets. Bezos named his after American astronauts Alan Shepard and John Glenn. Very reverential, very patriotic. Musk's, on the other hand, was initially called the BFR, which supposedly meant Big Falcon Rocket. But anyone who played the seminal 90s video game Doom will know it's actually a bit ruder. Perhaps unsurprisingly, The ultimate goal of their space exploits is straight out of a sci-fi novel.
Manufactured worlds rotated to create artificial gravity with centrifugal force.
The term that's being used a lot is large space colonies, and what he envisages is that millions of people should be living and working in space. And the reason why we need to do that is because set number of people on Earth, set number of resources, and actually we're using a lot of them up.
I think most likely the form of government on Mars would be somewhat of a direct democracy.
Some people would say he's actually obsessed with the red planet.
Then start building out the city, then making the city bigger.
So rather than living off planet, this is living on planet. He also fears that some humans are going to do something to the world, whether it's war or whether it's artificial intelligence. And he really feels that Mars needs to be this sort of backup planet Earth.
But before all this, the moon is the next step.
I mean, we should have a lunar base by now. What's going on?
In space resources, we have to use them. We were given a gift, this nearby body called the moon.
As there are shortages in various minerals and things like that, things that are available on the moon are getting more enticing and more commercially viable. I think what makes the moon so exciting is it has quite a low gravity. It has a sixth of the gravity of Earth. And so people are looking to go to the moon and using it as a launch pad to travel to the rest of the solar system.
This is not going to get done by any one generation.
This multi-generational campaign is truly a battle for hearts and minds.
Expand the scope and scale of human consciousness. I find that incredibly exciting. That makes me glad to be alive.
My friends who say they want to move to Mars, I say, look, do me a favor, move to the top of Mount Everest for a year first, because that's a garden paradise compared to Mars.
In this race, there are two finish lines, one for Bezos and one for Musk. So much of their success may depend upon generating belief in each of their own visions.
The transistor has made many of these feats possible.
It's perhaps not entirely by chance that two tech bosses ended up in space exploration. Ever since the launch of Sputnik, space and computer technology developed a sort of reciprocal relationship. In fact, it was NASA's appetite for technology that greatly helped catalyze the computing industry that would become Silicon Valley.
Once again, we owe our thanks to science.
You're competing with the likes of Jeff Bezos
Jeff who?
In any case, it's fair to say there's a bit of friction between the two magnates. Aside from early allegations of employee poaching, the real beef between them began when the entrepreneurs contested to use Launchpad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, the symbolically potent site where the first Apollo mission to the moon took off in 1969. Anticipating Musk's victory, Bezos filed a complaint about the selection process. The SpaceX boss retorted, "If Blue Origin somehow show up in the next 5 years with a vehicle qualified to NASA's human rating standards, we will gladly accommodate their needs. Frankly, I think we are more likely to discover unicorns dancing in the flame duct." The squabbling persisted in 2014 when an incensed Musk discovered Bezos' patent covering the landing of rockets at sea. His appeal was successful, arguing that the idea had existed for decades, even demonstrating this with old sci-fi movies that had depicted the concept. Their ongoing rivalry has become increasingly apparent on Twitter. So they like to bicker. But regardless of the differences, are their goals actually possible?
People want the sort of safety margins that you get from commercial airlines here on Earth, but they want that in space. And I think that's where the challenge lies. Bezos, I think he's got some grand plans. I think they may come to fruition. But from my experience, from the concept to the actual sort of delivery can be a long time because space is such a hostile environment. Looking at the track record of SpaceX so far, they've done all sorts of things that seemed like pie in the sky, but they've made them come to fruition. So I think it's almost if anyone can, Musk can. The idea of people colonizing Mars, I think, naturally leads to the idea of terraforming Mars, making Mars more Earth-like so people can wander around the surface without wearing helmets. It's sort of quite an amazing dream, and I think the science could be adapted so that we could make this happen. But at the same time, I think the question needs to be asked from an ethical point of view, should we be doing this?
Many see the first space race as coming to a symbolic end in 1975 with the Apollo-Soyuz test mission, the first joint US-Russian spaceflight. When the Cold War was at its height, no one could have predicted the US teaming up with the Soviets in space. And while the competitiveness of space enterprise seems to promise an exciting era of exploration and advancement, just imagine what might be achieved if the tech tycoons followed suit and joined forces.